really thrilled to introduce Bridget Cook-Burch, who is, oh my gosh, let me just tell the fun part of the story that, so the connection with Amy Walker. So Amy Walker spoke on day 2. I started working with Amy Walker in 2015 or maybe 2014 anyway. And so she knew that I needed more resources and specific support, and she recommended Bridget to me. And so within months, I think, of that recommendation, I was enrolling in some of her courses. Fun things that Bridget and I have experienced are definitely Bear Lake. And I had this one of my epic parts of my journey is I had to get in a collision with my brand new car before I could get to Bear Lake that day. And when I got there and I met with her, I knew it was so big, like everything in the world was, attempting to get in the way of this next step on my journey because it was massive. And so I remember I barely got there in time. I was so rattled, and my car still operated, but it was like, what does that mean about me? And I remember that was part of my story, is that I was imperfect. And even in every effort I made to strive for this perfection and the symbolism of a brand new car, like how long would that even last, right? And so being able to reframe my story was huge. So let me tell you about how she does that. Oh, and then there's India and all kinds of fun things, but we could just tell we could just spend the whole hour just talking about what we've done. That would be fun. All right, but let's talk about what Bridget has done to get here. So I love her beginning of her story, of her bio, climbing the sheer cliffs of her own personal challenges. Bridget Cook-Burch discovered if you change your story, you catapult your life to greater things. A near-death experience changed the way she saw herself and humanity, which provided profound opportunities to meet the most extraordinary people and write their stories. Bridget's co-authored books and their amazing subjects have been showcased on Oprah, Dateline, CNN, Good Morning America, 2020, The History Channel, and in People magazine, among many others, leaving readers and audiences deeply touched and inspired by the power and potential of their own story. Look around. We need more positive, motivating, inspiring stories like yours. Bridget wakes up every day with gratitude and excitement because she lives her passion by assisting others to live theirs, starting with the power of their words, of their voice, and their story to change this world. Her greatest passion is to help writers be successful. Published authors and leaders creating clarity for their message is so powerful for both the stage and the page. Even so, it's important to complete your book and to have it done so well that it grasps your audience right now and for generations to come. So Bridget has navigated the confusing, complex world of writing and publishing. Her greatest passion is to guide you through the publishing world through online classes, live retreats in beautiful locations like Bear Lake, as well as deeply personal trainings and one-on-one work. Well, Bridget has been accepted for the 𝐼ANS conference in August. Is that right? The International Association Near-Death Studies. And I just applied at her, I was thinking about it. And when I heard she was going, I'm like, oh yeah, this is happening. So we're holding on to those, great connections across the world, literally India and and as close as Bear Lake.
Thank you, Cristine. Wow. You just brought back so many fun memories. And what I love is how you've just taken these wonderful people on a journey of what is possible when you really begin to tackle the story of your life, which Cristine did. And of course, she hit some resistance. And yet you look at her today and the books she's written and the places she's traveled and visited and the people that she's had the ability to break bread with. It's extraordinary. And I remember when she was a little timid about it and she was unsure about aspects of it. And then she rose way beyond her story. So today we're going to talk about you. We're here for you. And I could not be more thrilled or delighted to have a discussion with you about yourself, because every single one of your relationships absolutely relies on the relationship with self first. And it is a lifelong journey, and oh, so delicious, and sometimes very hard and troubling. And so how do we work our way through that? How do we become more empowered? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I don't know how many of you loved James Cameron's Avatar, the movie. Any takers? Any big fans? So James Cameron's Avatar, right? There was a phrase in this movie that moved me the first time I heard it, and every time I watch it after, and it's, I see you. And any of you who have had intense trauma in your life, you probably have met another person who's had intense trauma, and you see each other. Those of you who've had intense spiritual experiences in your life and have sought to really continue your vibration, you get into the presence of another person, and it's like, I see you. You have a brand new baby that comes into the world. I'm a brand new Mimi as of 3 weeks ago, with a brand new, beautiful little girl named Brinley Sky. And I looked into her eyes and I said, I see you. The thing is that sometimes we are not seeing ourselves. Sometimes we look into the mirror and all we see are the flaws, the extra weight, the new lines of wrinkles, I'm not as built as my brother, or I'm not as sexy as my sister or my best friend, or whatever it might be. And instead of actually seeing ourselves, we're seeing all the things that we think are wrong. But I loved that movie because I felt like it captured the essence of actually seeing soul to soul. And today, I'm going to invite you to see yourself on a deeper level than perhaps you have ever seen before. And the second thing I want to talk to you about are the stories that we tell ourselves, because they are the most important stories. But it's also reflective of the games that we play in life. And so just like Cristine said, like everything was getting in her way to be able to take on her life in this particular regard. But she also said, did you hear it? That was part of her story. And so I didn't understand the games that people played when I was a sophomore in college. I was just trying to survive. And if any of you who have ever lived a portion of your life or most of your life in survival mode, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're just in the very bottom tier of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I was mistrustful of people because I was mistrustful of myself. I had a deep, huge yearning for God, but I did not think that I was worthy of Him. And I got really sick. I was working 3 jobs trying to prove myself. I was going to school and trying to prove myself. And I wanted to be with my friends as well, partying on the weekends, again, trying to prove myself. And I got really ill. I was so sick that here I am, this college sophomore, and I'm heading down the canyon from close to Bear Lake, where I was going to school at Utah State University, and down the canyon into this desert town called Brigham City, where my mother was living. And my mother and I did not have a great relationship at the time, although I loved her and she loved me, but it was the stories I kept telling myself. But I was headed down this canyon and I was sweating and my palms were hugging the steering wheel and I was shaking because I felt so rotten. You say I'd lost 30 pounds in the last 3 days and I didn't even realize it. I was so emaciated. I couldn't keep anything down. And I drove to my mother's house. Luckily, I made it all the way there. And she took one look at me and she said, "You're not well. Get into the car." And she took me straight over to the doctor's office where I collapsed. And they rushed me next door into the hospital into emergency surgery where they did all kinds of scopes to figure out what was going on. I was filled with sepsis. I had ulcerative colitis in my colon from all these ulcers from stress. I was literally eating my own body from the inside out because of the stories of unworthiness I was telling myself. That yearning for God that I had, I felt like my Catholic upbringing, which was ashes to ashes, dust to dust, which in my mind, I was no better than dust under God's feet and very unworthy. And I was they took out pints and pints of this poisonous infection. And then they put me on 7 different kinds of intravenous antibiotics trying to save my life. But I kept getting worse and no one knew why. And I was spiking these really high fevers. And then I finally fell asleep for a little while. And when I awakened, there was the most magnificent presence in my room, my hospital room, to the point where everything in my hospital room was vibrating with love. And this incredible person told me that I was being given a second chance at life. I knew who he was. I recognized him immediately, and I knew this is it. I fell back to sleep. When I woke up, my fever was down. The nurse comes wheeling in some new intravenous antibiotics, and I said, hey, I can have all of these, but I can't have this one. And I'll tell you what, she thought I was a French fry shy of a Happy Meal. She thought I was nuts. And the thing is that I'd never spoken up against any sort of authority figure in my life. But I told her, no, I cannot have that one. I knew. What's most important to share is that my story changed in that presence of unconditional love. My story of worthiness changed. And I knew I was worthy to be on the planet. And it was really beautiful because for the very first time, I could look into the mirror and I could see love there. Very first time in my life. And the awesome thing was that I could go out into the world and I could look into anyone's eyes and I could find love there. It was so powerful. So I'm in college, I get to graduate. By the way, I'm not supposed to have any children because of all that infection down in my abdominal area. And no one was more surprised than my doctor to find out I was pregnant. And I saw her in a vision, sitting in sunlight and playing. And I knew that there was a life that was growing inside of me. But I didn't know where I was. I hadn't ever seen this scene before or anything like that. And a moment later, it was gone. But I held it inside of me. And it was like, it changed my story too, that I was able to have children. So my husband and I, we moved to Denver, and I had the opportunity to grow this beautiful child and have this child. And I had anticipated before that I'd never be able to have kids. Like, I listened to someone else's story narration for my life. You will likely never be able to have children. I had listened to that. But now, because of that vision, that experience, I said, I will be able to have children. And I was able to have 3, which was beautiful. So I said, what could I do with my passions, my desires, my skill sets? And I thought, I want to be able to stay home with my kids as much as I can, but I have a desire to serve, especially after my narration was changed. I was very fascinated by other people and the stories that they told themselves. In fact, there is a quote from another author that I absolutely love, and it says, "The destiny of the world is determined less by the battles lost and won than by the stories it loves and believes in." I'm going to repeat that. The destiny of the world is determined less by battles lost and won than by the stories it loves and believes in. Now, I want you to take that into you. The destiny of my world is determined less by the battles I've lost and won than by the stories I love and believe in. So I want to ask you at this moment, ladies and gentlemen, are these stories of opportunities or are they stories of limitation? And I will admit to you that all of us have had or may still have stories of limitation. And I will also tell you that this creates for humanity an incredible hero's journey for you to be able to go on to find out more about yourself. And I'm going to share why. In storytelling, we have something that if you want a dynamic story, it's called the conflict character arc. Now, a lot of times in life, we're trying to avoid conflict. We hate the conflicts that we've been in. We're not proud of our story. We're ashamed. I held so much shame inside of me. We're frustrated at our limitations, right? Those are the stories, and these are the beliefs that are keeping us stuck. And on the other side of our conflict character arc is where we are victorious. It's where we have found victory over the belief systems, over the lies that have either been told to us or that we came to believe about ourselves because of our experiences. And it is that powerful. And I'm going to share some stories with you about that. So it was an amazing thing to be able to look in the mirror for the very first time and say, I see you. And today I'm going to invite you to do the same thing. So much changed for me when I got out of the hospital that I was no longer afraid of people. I was curious about their stories. And it was so beautiful too, because it was as if I could see them as God sees them. I saw all their light. I saw all their potential. And when I saw the darkness or I saw the places they were stuck, I didn't see them as character flaws and horrific things. I saw them as, oh, these are the gauntlets they get to run. These are the obstacles that they get to overcome. These are the conflicts that makes storytelling so absolutely juicy. So I want to just ask you, what book have you read or movie that you have watched that was so good and it didn't involve any conflict whatsoever, right? No movie, no dramatic epic movie does not involve conflict. It always has something for the main character, the protagonist, to overcome. Well, you are the protagonist in your own movie, your own memoir, your own life purpose. And so, of course, you're going to have some things to overcome, because these are going to be the experiences that shape you, that mold you, that make you different. I had a client yesterday, and he's this incredible life coach, and he works with people from all around the world, and he's writing this amazing book. But he says, everyone has their own glasses that they're looking at the world through. And if I take off my glasses and I give them to you, and you take off your glasses and you give them to me, I'm not going to be able to see. And it's because my prescription is just for me. Your prescription is just for you. Your rose-colored glasses are meant for you, and mine are meant for me, because there's certain things that we have decided we were going to learn and that we wanted to be able to create. And every person on the planet is here for a purpose. I find it absolutely amazing that each of us are as an individual as a snowflake, and that there's more than a 3.3, I believe, trillion chance that you are here on the planet at this time, at this place, with the people that you have around you. It's significant. It is not accidental. And in fact, it is so on purpose that it is a wonderful thing for you to discover more of your destiny, your power, your purpose through your own story, and to be able to see yourself through new eyes. So when I was working, we moved to Denver, and I was working at the YWCA and being a young mom, and I had the opportunity to work with these high-risk youth. And these were kids that, they were living life in a box. A lot of them, mom and dad are gang members, grandma and grandpa, gang members, aunt and uncle, cousins. It was all they knew. It was like their religion. And then I got to see people step in, relationships, right, who loved them enough to show them a different way. And all of a sudden, I would see light come on in their eyes. I would watch them make different choices, because when we know better, we do better, right? I would see this in these young kids, 16, 17, 18. Some of them had committed some pretty heinous crimes. And I would see them realize that they did not have to be a victim of their circumstances, their backgrounds, their experiences, their family members, those old belief systems, that they could actually choose a different way, that they had 360 degrees of glorious choices. Like, that's amazing. And I would watch them unfold before my eyes. Not every one of them. I watched a lot fall too. And when I watched them fall, I saw where the stories were like shackles. I saw where their limitations were what they let define them, and it broke my heart. But I also saw so much hope in humanity, and I thought I might be a fictional writer, and I had the most amazing experiences with these young men and women that I fell in love with the human soul. And I heard this quote by Mother Teresa, and she said, "I am the pen in the hand of a God who is writing a love letter to the world." And I thought, oh my gosh, that's me. Not Mother Teresa, believe me. But the pen in the hand of a God who is writing a love letter to the world. So I got to write some of these stories. The first one was about a former skinhead who changed his life. Now, I didn't meet any skinheads in Colorado at the time. There were some in California and New York and some other places. I didn't know much about them, but one night I had a dream. I had characters, scenes, plots, and even eye color, and I knew I had the makings of the most incredible novel. I woke up, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm thinking, bestseller, I can't wait. And so I went and I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And then, as some of you may have experienced, a young mom, I'd have to put it away for quite a while, and then I'd bring it back up in the dead of night or little snatches of time. Then I went to do some research on this idea, because the gang kids I met, Nuestra Familia and the Bloods and the Crips, no skinheads. So I'm doing research on it, and it was some of the things that I had studied in college, except in European history, because they believed in the same precepts as Hitler. Like, if you're not white and you're not healthy, you should be euthanized and sterilized and wiped off the planet. And I was floored. It was such a different mindset. And so I write some more things down. I'm doing more research. And then I find out that everything I had written about in my fictional novel and everything that was listed on a particular skinhead's website were in tandem. I found the protagonist, the hero of my story, and he was real. And on his website, he said, "Oh, by the way, I'm looking to write. I'm trying to find someone to help me write my life story. If you know of anyone, have them call me." And I thought, you have got to be kidding. And then I thought, if I call him, he'll think I'm a French fry shy of a Happy Meal, right? But I called him, and over time, we developed a relationship, and I was able to release his book, Skinhead Confessions: From Hate to Hope. And the Jason Alexander from Seinfeld, who is Jewish, he wrote the foreword for the book. And it was an incredible journey. My very first book, my very first story out in the world. And I will tell you, all the things that I got to learn in the writing of another individual's story was tremendous, but didn't stop there. And what I want to share with you is that there was a woman who reached out to TJ and then also to the publisher. And then she sent me an email, and she said, "I read your book. I've contacted these people." And she says, "I think if someone could take a story of so much darkness and create something of healing, it would be you." And then she said, "I'm the daughter of a serial killer. Would you help me write my life story?" And I can still remember, like, falling to my knees in my office, remembering part of my mission is to be this pen in the hand of a God who is writing a love letter to the world. And I thought, how in the world do I do that and write a story of hope and healing about a serial killer's daughter? It was a big leap. And I knew, however, that it was a part of my life purpose, but I knew I couldn't do it alone either. And so I said a lot of prayers on my knees. I happen to get a lot of inspiration in the shower, and some of you know about the incredible power of water, and I believe that has a lot to do with it as well. But all of a sudden in the shower, I received this incredible confirmation um, of that this story could be written as a transformational true story of how Melissa had overcome being a serial killer's daughter. And it did not have to be true crime in nature, and it did not have to have salacious details, but it did get to have her emotional story of what it was like for her at age 16 to discover that her father was a serial killer. She's just figuring out what it means to be a young woman. She's developing curves. She's, feeling attractions and trying to figure out, what does it mean for me to be a woman? And then this with her dad. Now, what I want to share with you is that Melissa hid all of this from her friends and her family because her father was a long haul truck driver. She wasn't living with him. When he would come in, he would save the day. He brought groceries. He did all of these wonderful things for his kids because he's a true sociopath, but nobody knew. And his children were extensions of himself. So he loved and adored them. And they were grateful for him because they were extremely poor and not well cared for by their mother and grandmother. And so she finds all of this out, and so she hides it. Like, if you had this kind of skeleton in the closet, would you want everyone to know who you are? But the thing is that she went on to find a really good man. She went on to have 2 children of her own, still hiding from her own shadow. And then one day her daughter Aspen comes skipping home from school, and she's like, "Mommy, we found out about daddies at school today, and everybody's got a daddy. Where's your daddy?" And Melissa was like, oh my gosh. She knew she would have to answer these questions, but she didn't think it would be so soon. So she went to libraries and bookstores, and she searched, and everywhere she could find, like, if you're a victim of a crime, there's all kinds of resources to assist you. But if you love someone who has committed heinous crimes, there was very little out there. And so Melissa decided she was going to write a book. And when she found out, and this is really important, when she found out that there was a young girl who was the daughter of the Spokane killer, is when Melissa wanted desperately to reach out to her, but she knew the media would crucify her, so she just remained silent. But when it came time for us to write this book, she said, I know who I'm writing for. And so today, as we're speaking, today as you're thinking about your own story, whether you want to write a memoir or you just want to get in touch with the power of your own story, there are 2 aspects of this that I want you to keep in mind. And one is to see you more deeply, more honestly, more transparently, more powerfully. And the second is to be able to serve others, again, more powerfully, with more inspiration, with more desire, with more purpose and passion. And so she whittled it down to this one person. There was so much great power in that Melissa shows up on Oprah, Dr. Phil, CNN, Good Morning America. All of a sudden, this book is kicking butt and taking names. Why? Not because we said, we want to have a best-selling book. There's nothing wrong with that. It was, we want to be of service to other people who have experienced the pain that we've been in, and we want to make sure that they know that they are divine and that they are not the skeleton in the closet, and they are the identity that they choose instead of someone else. Now, here's the cool thing. Melissa, in terms of the relationship with herself and others, she went on to become a producer in LA. And she created a series called Monster in My Family, but it's where she brought the families of serial killers. Think of like the Boston bomber, okay? She brought the families of serial killers and the families of the victims together so they could heal. No one in the history of Hollywood has ever done that. And she was a catalyst for some other amazing things. Also, March 20th, the book's been out for 15 years, but March 20th, there's a series coming out on Paramount Plus, and it's extraordinary. But I will tell you, the power of this is Melissa allowing herself to go deep and to share first for herself and then for someone else the power in her story. And then amazing miracles have happened because she chose to be of service. So I want to share with you that I don't want you to get your workbooks out right now, because I'm going to want you to do this work a little bit later. But I want you to remember that I had developed a portion of a mission statement. I am the pen in the hand of a God who is writing a love letter to the world. And then this is happening while I'm working on TJ's story, but Melissa's story happened. And then the 19th wife of 65 comes into my space. I don't go looking for it. It's this book called The Witness Wore Red. It hit New York Times, Wall Street Journal, all of these things. Not because I went looking for it, because I was living my mission. And I have a mission that I don't just share with anyone, but in groups where you're doing so much personal development and you're recognizing the power of your own story, I'm going to share with you mine. So I told you about the havoc that I created when I was younger, rotten relationships, working too much, trying to prove myself, lousy grades, and, not great relationships with my mom and my dad and people around me. So the first thing that was important to me was to be in co-creation. So it starts out in partnership with God. I fulfill the measure of my creation through radiance, joy, love, and healing, dancing with angels in concert with Christ, as the abundant light of God now powerfully illuminating the healing path of generation upon generation, forward and back, in gratitude and honor. All glory to God, and so it is. And that was my fire. That was my mission statement. And then I began to develop a vision for being able to do that. And it took me on a journey, just like all of you are on this like roller coaster of life, right? These ups and these downs and new opportunities. And do I want to go this way? Do I want to go that way? I was able to run a trucking company when I was raising my children so that I could afford a home and afford groceries on the table and some other things, but it was not my passion. And I kept that mission statement in my mind, and it helped me with a forward vision. And I was eventually able to sell my portion of the trucking company to my business partner, and I was able to do this work with stories full time. So my question for you is, what could be your mission statement? What is the fulfillment of the measure of your creation on the planet? Why are you here? In Japanese, they have this word that I absolutely love. It's called Ikigai. It's Ikigai. Ikigai, and it means your reason for breathing. And they even have a beautiful illustration, but it's doing what you love, doing what the world needs, doing something that you can do to make money, and also choosing to be good at it. And when it comes to writing, not everyone is good or great at it. I've worked with some of the most incredible people who only have had an 8th grade education, some that came out of the FLDS cult, some that, quit to work to serve their families when they were quite young. The amazing thing is that you can always get a great editor for any type of work that you want to do in your writing, but no one, ladies and gentlemen, has your incredible content. No one has lived life, seen it through your eyes, felt it through your bones, lived the truths, the challenges, and the triumphs on the other side. There's also a wonderful thing that I love to be able to expose, because many people who are into professional development, self-development, and spiritual journeys are doing it because they have been on a hero's journey. They have been through some sort of trauma. And so as they have made their way along this incredible circle of life, they stepped into an extraordinary world, usually not wanting to. Divorce or cancer or childhood sexual abuse or the loss of a loved one or the loss of a limb or whatever it might be. And then came out on the other side having faced battles, having faced dragons. And the biggest one being is when you're in the dark night of the soul and you have to face the dragon and you recognize that the dragon is you. This is what makes not only for really great story, but for really beautiful personal triumph. Because when you can look in the mirror and you see where you are responsible for these patterns, then you have the ability to step out of that dark night of the soul and choose different, to step back into the battle of everyday life, but be different, to be more loving in your relationships, to be more self-compassionate and then compassionate to others, to be more trusting of the universe and of yourself, to be less judgmental of humanity and of yourself. And so there are extraordinary opportunities for you in the development of your story. And I want to share with you that one of the most powerful tools for anyone to be able to even take the first steps to begin to realize the power of what you have been through, what you have done, and what you have survived and triumphed over, is for you to write a timeline of your life. I have one that I give to my authors called Write Juicy, but the left brain portion are all the rites of passage, you know, when you were born and where you lived and all of the things that set the scene that made you you, marriages, divorces, children, grandchildren, all of those lovely things, right? And I say lovely because eventually they are. But then the right brain things, which are the juicy stories that flesh out you. There are certain stories about your rises and falls that you probably have never shared with a single other soul. Probably not your children, maybe not your spouse, maybe even your best friend does not know the power of all of your stories. But the first one who needs to witness this is you. And what's really beautiful, you choose to do this work, because a lot of times when people think about their past, they're pulling down bits and pieces of their story, and then they don't know what to do with it all. But when you put it into a chronological timeline and you're seeing it in black and white, a 72-year-old woman who I absolutely adore, she said, "I like me better now. I understand me better now." And I get to see that happen in authors' lives over and over and over again. Last week, I got a text from an author who was told when she was a little girl that she'd been gaslit her whole life. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. Here's the situation in our family. This really is your dad, you know, and she got slapped for once saying that this is not my father. Anyway, she goes to have these series of very intense spiritual experiences, including a near-death experience in the waters of Puerto Rico, where she almost loses her life. And in that near-death experience, her stepfather shows up, but there's also this man that keeps coming down this dark tunnel to stand by this Christ-like figure. And he has this strange hair, like Elvis kind of hair, and she doesn't know. Later in life, she did a DNA test, and come to find out all the things that she was told, this is not the truth, this is really the truth, which was not the truth. She found out that the Elvis type hair was her birth father, and she now has two sisters, and they've showed her pictures, and she got finished with writing her book, and she said, I finished reading from beginning to end. I know I'm not crazy. I know I'm not loony, and it's as if I have been baptized with the fire of that renewal of knowledge of who I really am. And this is the power of what happens when you work on your memoir, when you give yourself credit, when you become a witness to that greater sense of who you are and what you are all about, which is absolutely amazing. So if I had a challenge for you, it would be to write down a mission statement that can color your own world in a beautiful light and set you on a path. And then if you have a vision of this higher self, of how you want to show up in the world, and for all of us, it's going to be different. We all have different talents, skills, abilities, etc., right? Well, I didn't realize that part of my vision was in my mission. And what I didn't tell you in the beginning was that by the time I was 6 months old, I was on my third set of parents. I was adopted. And I carried this deep wound with me my whole life of, I'm not good enough, I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't pretty enough, I wasn't smart enough for my parents to keep me. And it stayed with me until that moment in the hospital room. And then I create this mission statement. And what I want to share with you is I didn't know at the time, I knew I was adopted, but I did not know about this part about the illuminating path, right, of generations forward and back in gratitude and honor, all glory to God, and so it is. Well, when I turned 50, one of my authors gave me a DNA test as a kit. And I was like, oh no, I do not want to do that. I don't want to open this can of worms. Like that's like way in the past. That is something. And she said, Bridget, you're always asking us to dig deep on our stories that we may blossom and grow from the very root of us. How is it that you think that you will not blossom and grow from doing this? And she challenged me to the core. And I'd been a secret for 50 years. And that DNA test, it sat right here on my desk for 2 months. I could not bring myself to even look at it. But finally, I spit in a little tube and I sent it off. And even then, I ignored it for a while until another friend called me to the carpet. We got to have good relationships around us, good support systems. And I looked and, there'd be like second or third cousins. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to go there. People won't know how I'm related. I don't want to open a can of worms. I don't want to create issues. And then one day I found an immediate relative. And it said it'll either be a great grandmother, which I'm old enough that, unfortunately, that's probably not possible, an aunt or a niece. And I knew my mother had 2 brothers, but no sister, my birth mother. So I was like, well, it's probably a niece, and I don't know if I really want to open this can of worms. But she reached out to me and she says, oh, by the way, this is my husband's DNA. And she said, and by the way, we live in Sandy, Utah. Where do you live? And I'm like, 7 minutes from you. And then she said, so do you think you're my husband's second cousin or something? And I said, well, actually, I think he's my uncle. And she's like, oh. She has to come apart. And she's like, can you come over tonight? I'm sharing this because the day before, I knew nothing about my DNA, where I came from, what culture I had come from, what situations, circumstances, family, what even they looked like. And suddenly the next day, I go and ring the doorbell to my mother's twin brother, and I see my own eyes. There's something really remarkable when we decide that we're going to be courageous in our own stories and our own purpose. I now have 79 new immediate family members, and there is so much story with that. And people are like, are you going to write about that eventually? Yes, I'm really busy writing other people's stories right now. But what I will tell you is this: there is great power in your story. There is great power in the words that you choose to use, especially when you're talking about yourself. And there is great power in your intention and determination that, number one, how you're going to treat yourself, and number two, how you're going to choose to show up in the world as this greater part of yourself, as a greater gift, as a contribution, as I like to say. And it doesn't mean that everybody's going to love you. You're going to have, as you see everywhere in the world, there will be opposition, but there will also be those who will say, like maybe you will with Cristine, thank you for being your contribution. I have learned so much just by knowing you. One last thing I want to share before a final story is that in the end of the workbook, you're encouraged to call out for yourself a word for the year. And in the past, I used like vitality. Oh, you have been doing vital body. I've used grace. I've used rise. A few years ago, I used a tiny phrase, and it was radical self-acceptance. This year, to resonate with where I'm at, I thought it was going to be brave, or it was going to be courage. And then I realized what I get to be this year, again, is curious. I am a student servant leader. I love to learn, and I get to ask again so many questions. The greatest periods of growth in my life have been when I have been curious, when I have been open to other knowledge, information, to my angels, to whatever beautiful wisdom and new knowledge gets to come my way. And so I want to know what your word for the year is. And if you've suddenly been, or you have already been doing this work, I would love for you to write your word in the chat and claim it for the whole world of what your word is for this year. And then I want to end with one story, of course. There is a gentleman who has moved me so much. And talk about relationships. Little Gary Lee Price was born in Idaho, and then he lived with his mother and stepfather on a U.S. Army base in Mannheim, Germany. And as he was being a little boy and just learning how to be a leader with the neighborhood kids and doing all these wonderful things, he came home one day to find that his mother and stepfather had been arguing. And then he was put to bed, but he could tell his mother was frightened. And then he woke up as his stepfather committed murder-suicide. It was a really tragic beginning for a little child. But I will tell you this. He was taken from that Army base, and he was shipped back to the States to his father, unfortunately from the frying pan into a fiery den of abuse, because there was a stepbrother from his father's side now in a new marriage that was 7 years older, and nobody knew because the adults were working nights. So Gary survived horrific levels of abuse. And, we have choices when hurt people hurt us. And we can turn around and we can hurt other people, which can happen, or we can make different choices. Gary found art. He became a famous painter in the area. And then when he found clay, ooh, his world took off. He also found God. And these two things developed within him his life purpose. Why I'm sharing this with you is that some of these stories that I'm talking to you are about our extreme, right? On this pendulum, and your story likely is going to be somewhere on that pendulum in there. You can find yourself, which is extraordinary, because there comes a time when we need to decide that as adults, no matter what has happened to us, no more excuses. I'm going to show up in the world. Well, Gary became a famous sculptor worldwide, Hong Kong Library and parks and cemeteries, and his sculptures are found everywhere, but he also created a statue of responsibility. And this is in answer to Dr. Viktor Frankl's dream, who survived 3 concentration camps. And he would come and speak in the United States, and he loved the United States and all the freedoms we had here, but he said, you need to have a statue of responsibility in the West to bookend the Statue of Liberty in the East, because you cannot have liberty without responsibility. And what I love is that Gary's depiction of responsibility is one hand reaching down to lift another. In his relationships, he was either the hand lifting up for help that his 3rd grade teacher reached down for, that other people in his life reached down to lift him up. And then there have been times where Gary has been the hand reaching down. And in your lifetime, you are going to see a 305-foot statue to match the Statue of Liberty, but it was the Statue of Responsibility. And I'm excited that you might be as moved by him in that story as I am, and that you might also choose, what will I do with the cards that I have been dealt? And what will I choose to do with this elixir of life? Because the last thing is, when you go on a hero's journey and you decide to come out victorious on the other side, is that you bring back with you something magical. It's called the elixir of life. And it is a magic that no one else on the planet has, because they haven't been wearing your glasses. They haven't had your experiences, but you have this now, that through your writing, through your service, through whatever fulfillment of your creation is, it is this magic. It is your secret sauce that no one else has to bring. And I dare you, I double dog dare you, I challenge you today to spend some time. What is my mission? What is my vision? What is my word for the year? And what magic on my hero's journey have I brought back to be able to share? Thank you, everyone, for your time. I have appreciated this so much. And the other presenters, I'm learning a ton, and I hope you are as well. But I've really enjoyed this time. Thank you.
That was so good. I also shared, you did this gorgeous booklet for us, and I want you to just address epic real quick before we go. Because you shared your mission story, and people were like, oh, you got to have your own mission story. So how do they create their mission story with epic? And I'm going to give you just bonus. But in the book, it starts with powerful words equal a powerful life. Remember that. And Mark Twain said, a half-truth is the most cowardly of lies. Right?
Yeah, so your epic, ladies and gentlemen, oftentimes we play so small, right? We don't give ourselves credit. And that's why writing down your story is so powerful, choosing to follow that timeline and be a witness to yourself. But epic is evolutionary purpose, igniting contribution. That means that you allow yourself to evolve. It is a revolution inside of yourself. You no longer choose to play small, but everything that has ever happened to you, you give it credit for how it has sculpted you into a more magnificent person. And, you know, Moby Dick, he said that if you want to have a mighty book, you must have a mighty theme. And he says, a lot of people try to write about a flea and they fail. You I encourage you not to treat yourself as a flea, but as epic. Doesn't mean you're a whale, but as epic, revolutionary, and you will find that the things that you were oppressed by have now become your superpowers. So thank you, Cristine. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yes. It was, yeah, that's beautiful because I know that that was part of that barrier that I was facing, those obstacles is that that's interesting you refer to that. I was living very small. And part of my story was being in the relationship with a narcissist. And when you describe that, we're going to go to that next. And I'm going to let Bridget actually introduce me because I decided not to play small and introduce myself and and to have a large presentation of, because I know that what I found is big and it is that Marianne Williamson quote that people quote, that they reference all the time, that we're not afraid of being little and being, ignored. We're afraid of being
Yeah.
big.
Our
Yeah.
biggest fear is that we were powerful beyond measure.